Welcome to the Lions Awaken show, where today we are going to talk about transgenderism, what God says about it, what we should do about it, and the flaws in transgender philosophy and their ideas, basically, which is philosophy.
That's basically it. Transgender philosophy. The
right.
flaws behind this evil ideology, because that's what it is. Mm-hmm. It's an evil ideology. And, I mean, this whole thing, you have the historical context behind this, right?
A little bit. So supposedly the term transgender was coined by psychiatrist John F. Olivan at Columbia University in his 1965 work called Sexual Hygiene and Pathology. That's, I guess, when the first time transgender as a term came out. But, I mean, transgenderism kind of, like, it's not new. Nothing is new under the sun. So as I was researching this, like, you have the deities back in the day. You had Aphroditus, who was a deity introduced in Grecia and celebrated in Athena through transvestite rituals, which was probably during Paul's day. I don't know, like when the Greek Empire was going. You had the Hindu androgynous, or how do you say that word? Androgynous, yeah. Androgynous deity called Andhanarishvara, and they worship her still in like southern India, I think. Like they have this 21-day pagan festival, and that's like the transgender community. And like there were other ones back in like 1500 BC. There was this queen, I guess of Egypt, Queen Hatshepsut. Well, I already say her name. She ruled for 22 years. She lived from 1507 to 1458 BC, and she was known to wear traditional male clothing and a false beard showing kingship. So like kind of like acted as a man. So that was already way back then. And then in 218 to 222 AD, you had Elagabalus, who was a Roman emperor from 218 to 222 AD. And he loved to be called the mistress, the wife, and the queen of Heracles, which I guess was a man. I don't know who that was. I didn't do that much research. But it was said at that time that they offered vast sums of money to any physician that could equip them with female genitalia. So this idea of like transsexualism, transgenderism, I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. This has been, Satan has had his hand in this since the beginning of time, I think, and like historical records. And but it's just like this one woman was saying, her name is Camille Paglia. I think that's how you say her name. I'm sorry if it's not, but she said that when you look at history, because she's been studying androgynous. How do you say that name? Right?
Androgynous.
Okay, thank you. That word. She says she's been studying that, and historically, the move towards androgyny occurs in late phases of culture as civilizations are starting to unravel and decrease. And you saw that in the Hellenistic period, like the Greek art started painting men as more feminine and like weaker instead of like before the robust, muscular, strong. Yeah, they started painting them differently.
Noodly.
Yeah. So that was one, and then she listed some other like great civilizations that came to an end. But towards that end, it's just moral decay, and she said that it's when a culture no longer starts believing in itself, I guess, or something like that.
Well, ask Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
They also came to an end because of that kind of perversion.
Sexual gender perversion.
Actually, the angels came to rescue Lot, and all the men in the city came to have sexual relations with the angels, which were male, or they appeared as male humans, and then all the men in the city came to have sexual perversion with them. And alongside that, like, historical context, even God left provision, like when he said in Deuteronomy 22:5. God said, "A woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear women's clothing. For the Lord your God detests anyone who does this." So it's abomination to God, basically. And I think he left this provision on the Bible and on the Torah, particularly the law for the Jewish people, because other cultures probably engaged in those kinds of behaviors. And God was taking care of his people and of the moral.
He wanted that distinction
Exactly.
between a man and a woman.
And because that keeps the nuclear family protected, which is what I think this ideology and this philosophy goes against.
After that, yeah.
It goes against the family and against God's design, literally, because it's saying, God, you made a mistake. It's that bold of a statement.
But then if people you against that argument say, well, what about the few that are born with both genitalia, or like they're hermaphrodites is what you call them, or
Yeah.
whatever. And so they like to use that very minority example to make their case for everyone.
It's 0.0018%, I believe.
But even
People born intersex.
then, when they're born with both genitalia of a male and female,
There's primary characteristics.
you have the chromosomes, you have the hormones, and you have the brain structure. Like the whole DNA is different, man and a woman. And this one video of this guy I was watching on YouTube, he was basically, he was calling himself a Christian, saying Bible and transgenderism, or what does the Bible say about transgenderism, basically. And he said that you have all those things that determine whether you're a guy or a woman, but then with those you have the identity. So if somebody wants to, their identity doesn't align with their chromosomes, their hormones, and their brain structure, then they should have a right, those are the minority, that they should have a right to align themselves and be happy. And because...
But then that's saying that God made a mistake in creating you.
Exactly. And he tried to say like, oh, that argument doesn't hold any water.
And
then my argument comes back to the whole identity, because this whole thing is an identity thing.
Yeah, this is an
it's
identity
an identity
crisis,
thing.
yeah.
And it's if your brain, if your thoughts are always the final authority, then why have a scripture that says take every thought captive? Like if your brain is the truth, like if you're listening to your brain, then is there a truth, or is just your brain the truth?
Yeah.
And so I don't...
Yeah, then you should pursue any thought, any feeling that you have that your brain, or that comes in your mind, and you shouldn't have any boundaries at all. It should just be whatever pops into your thought.
Exactly.
And by
Just go
just
for
focusing on the identity thing, you're logically and reasonably throwing away all the other things that indicate you're born this way, therefore you are this way, because God defined what that is in the Bible.
Yeah. That's why transgenderism, otherwise known as gender dysphoria, is a mental disorder. It's not a biological fact or a biological reality. It's a mental disorder. And, that's why I think it's so scary that our culture, our society promotes and enables mental disorders, because it's like, we would never, if an anorexic person came up to us and said, I'm fat, I am huge, look at me, I'm ginormous, when reality is she's too skinny, she actually needs to eat food, she actually needs to, or he, whoever it may be, I'm not trying to make it a gender thing, no pun intended, no pun intended. But I mean, we would never, and even society and culture would never, although we are kind of leaning towards it, we would never say, oh yeah, you're right, you are huge, you are fat, like you're ginormous. Like we would never enable that. We'd be like, no, listen, that thinking, that mindset that you have, like that's not an accurate reflection of reality of what you are going through and what you actually look like. But for some reason with gender, it's like we're all in on it. We're all in on this game, and we're like, yeah, we got to play this game too. And it all goes back to, again, I think the reason why our society and culture is doing this is because the devil has such a grip on especially our generation's identity. Because that's the main thing with our generation. There is an identity crisis, like big time. Like we do not know who we are in Christ because we don't know who Christ is like foreign to us in our generation. And I think there's many reasons why. It's because we've slowly been removing Christ as the foundation in our society for the past, 50, 60, 70, 100 years. And so I just think it's scary that we're enabling this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say, like, we wouldn't do all this other stuff, but we're accepting this gender dysphoria. And Camille Paglia said that transgenderism is like a fashion.
Yeah, it's
for
a
those
trend.
who feel alienated from the culture. So, for example, she said if they would be alive in the 50s, they would become beatniks, which I didn't know what that was, and I still kind of don't know, but it's kind of like a first version of the hippies, I guess, where you like a bunch of hitchhikers and stuff. This was post-war, and so if you felt like you didn't belong to the culture, you just joined this gang.
Loners or whatever.
Loners and drugs.
Outcasts.
Yep. Or if they were born in the 60s, they would be hippies. But now that they're born in the 2020s, now they're part of the transgender because they don't know who they are, like you said, and they don't feel part of the culture. So this is the trending thing. This is the fashion thing that, you basically have to agree with it too. Otherwise you'll get isolated and persecuted, even in college. And so it's like, it's just a trend. But the dangerous thing is that people actually do surgery and do irreversible damage to them. I mean, God can redeem anybody. And there's plenty of stories out there. You did an article on Morningstar Journal News about that. Quick plug, Morningstar Journal News. If you want to find some good news articles, go to morningstarjournal.com and find articles that reflect a biblical and prophetic perspective on what's going on in the world. It's a great website, and it's up and coming. It's going to take over the world. Check it out.
Well, I think with what Caleb was saying, it's certainly scary because what are you going to allow next? That's the question. Like, what are you going to allow, pedophilia? Or are you going to allow people killing other people because that makes them happy? And that's just how they find happiness. And you cannot judge them because that's what they do. So how far are you going to push your moral boundaries to accept, quote unquote, everybody? Because that's other thing when you said about Jesus and the identity. I think our generation has a wrong view of grace, and that's why we have a whole mess. Like when you have a view of grace that justifies sin and not the sinner, then you start allowing all these things and try to justify them with the Bible and calling them good so they can feel accepted. And my point is not to make people feel accepted. It's to actually make them accepted in the beloved, in Jesus. They can find approval if they find Jesus. But as long as they remain as they are, and it's with all of us. I mean, with what you were saying with the trends, right? It's not that we are aiming at transgenderism because we hate them. No, we don't hate them. If the trend was finding identity in drugs, well, we could aim at drugs because drugs are not your identity. If the trend was finding identity on a mafia or gang, we're gonna say no. That's not a family. That's not a real family. Real family is what you develop with God, with relationship with others, with healthy relationships. So we are not aiming at transgenderism because we hate them, but because we love them and because we really want them to discover who they really are.
And again, just to clarify, we do hate transgenderism, the ideology.
The ideology,
the
not the
people who are suffering and who are going through this and who are deceived, quite frankly.
Exactly.
We love them. It's a lie, yeah. And the Bible says to gently instruct those who oppose the truth.
Exactly.
So we're not here to bash transgenders or hate on them or anything like that. We're just telling them the truth, that the ideology that they're practicing is in fact evil, and they need to stop because it will destroy them.
Yeah.
And it is destroying them. That's why you see such a high suicide rate in the transgender community, is because, again, they're lonely, they're depressed, they're deceived, and they know that deep down, this isn't their identity. This fake, putting on this fake identity and trying to be something they're not. They know deep down that that's wrong, and that they need Jesus. That's what they need. They need Jesus, and they don't know how to get that.
They literally need Jesus, because not only are they destroying themselves, but now, like Charlie Kirk pointed out, you have the big pharmaceutical companies that make tons of money off of these surgeries and off of these drugs and stuff they're giving them, the hormone treatments and stuff like that. I heard recently that Brown University, which is like one of the supposedly top schools in the country, put sex reassignment surgeries on their insurance policies for students. Yeah. So now they're taking advantage of students that go to college and they're confused about their lives. And so now they're thinking, well, if I'm going to have a surgery, I might as well do now when it's free instead of later. So they don't actually think about it. So now they do this surgery, and then, years later they might be like, why did I do this? This is not who I am. And now I've ruined myself from ever having babies, of having a family. This is life altering, basically.
Yeah,
and so they take advantage of these people.
And also, just to jump on with that, I was reading, I was listening to Ben Shapiro, and he pointed out too, it's crazy the world we live in. 12-year-old kids at school, if they want Tylenol, the school has to call their parents to ask if they can give their child Tylenol.
So I'm going to clarify what he said. He said Tylenol. So just so you know.
My Canadian accent. Tylenol.
Tylenol sound like a Southern.
Well, that's, yeah. Anyway.
Sorry, go ahead.
But with hormone blocking pills, if 12-year-old kids decide, if a 12-year-old boy decides, you know what, I'm a girl, I want to be a girl, and they go to their teacher about it, and the teacher has resources to give them hormone blocking pills or whatever it may be to help them transition, they do not have to contact the parents and listen to the parents. And this is in certain states, certain schools, but it's just that's the world we live in. It's unbelievably crazy. That's why the devil he has such a strong grip on the gender identity in our culture, because for people to even hear that and to say that that's okay, that you have to call parents for Tylenol, but you don't need to call them for hormone blocking pills, that's just so messed up.
Yeah,
it is messed up.
But again, we're reaching the end of a civilization, because the culture is no longer believes in itself, like that woman was saying, because the church hasn't preserved it. We need to be the salt and the light, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can we, as a church, be the answer to this? How do we answer to these people that...
I got the answer. We speak the truth. We tell them exactly what it is. It's literally that simple. But we do it out of love.
Right.
We do it out of love. We do it with love and compassion. But we do not sacrifice the truth on the altar of political correctness or on the altar of feelings. And that's the thing. We live in a society where feelings is
the truth.
Objective,
is the absolute truth,
and facts is subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, say that again. Say that again. That was
we
good.
live in a society where feelings is objective truth and facts are subjective.
Ooh.
And that's not...
You can sum that all up right
that's
there.
That's not
that
accurate.
sense.
That's not reality. And that's not true. That's not the truth. And so we need to get out of this whole feeling culture and go back to actual basic truth and facts and biology, and just speak the truth and not enable people and be like, you know what, you're feeling this way? Yeah, I agree. Just keep on feeling this way, just keep on. You.
Yeah, that, and I think it's the church and the Christians as a whole need to have an understanding of what is going on and have an understanding on how to talk to people like this. Because if they throw scriptures at you, they're going to be like, well, you have to be knowledgeable in these things. Yeah. And so you have to look into it, do some research, and talk to people.
God created male and female, period.
It's that simple.
Genesis 1:27.
Yeah.
Genesis 2:4-25.
And a mental thing, it comes back to, we have Like we have this spiritual battle we're in. So to just give into our thoughts is not actually engaging in a battle for Christ. Our battle's up here.
Yep.
So if we're just listening to our thoughts instead of taking them captive, that's not being a Christian. That's not following after Christ. You're not becoming Christ-minded or Christ-like. You're letting the devil control you and being conformed to the devil.
This testimony that you mentioned that I did an article on here at Morningstar Journal News. She was a woman, right, and she became a transgender man, right, where she made all the surgery and stuff to become a man. But then when she met Christ, she said for the period of a year, she was reading the Bible, she was praying, but she said, I was seeking Christ, but I did not love Christ. Like, I did not love him as I love him today. I was not following him, she said. Because for that period of time, I was reading my Bible. I was pursuing a relationship with Jesus, but I was living my own sinful way until God opened my eyes and I discovered this is wrong and I cannot keep living like that. And she did something that is called detransitioning, and which is a huge thing nowadays. But
So did she already have sexual reassignment surgery?
Oh yeah, she already had sexual, and she was taking the pills and everything. But she made detrans surgery.
Wow.
To have her body back and everything back, which you can do, and it's a huge thing. Just that media will never cover it, of course. But the thing is that she did this, and she was saying, I was not following Christ until I decided to obey him. When I decided I'm gonna obey him over what I feel, over what I have believed, the lies that I've believed, that's the moment, she said. That's the moment when I started following him. Even though I was looking for him, I was seeking him, I was hungry for him. But that's the moment when I became a Christian, because I followed him.
Right, because Christian means follower of Christ, right? So if you just believe in Christ but you don't follow his teachings, you're not a Christian.
So is Jesus a Christian?
No.
I'm just kidding.
He is Christ.
He is Christ.
That's right.
Boom.
He is
People
God.
have said that before. But no, I wanted to comment on what Matt said too. Like what I think the church and Christians need to do as well is also obviously be informed and know what's going on and know that this is an evil ideology that is spreading. It is spreading. The numbers are rising. And I think now Gen Z, like 4.9% of Gen Zers identify as LGBTQ+. Wow. That's a big jump from like previous generations being in the 1 and 2% and even 0. Whatever percent. So we are seeing a rise in this evil ideology, but
because nobody's stopping them.
no one's stopping it. But also, it's like we need to know this culturally, but we also need to be aware politically. There are politicians promoting this that are enacting laws to promote this and to protect this, the surgeries and stuff, and protect kids that want to transition and basically ruin their lives. And when they don't even know what clothes they would want to put on the next morning because they're so young, but yet they know what sex they want to be, like that. Yeah. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, this is literally integrated into politics.
It's literally integrated into politics. And Biden, literally, his administration, I did an article on this a couple days ago.
At Morningstar Journal News.
At Morningstar Journal News. Go check it out. They publicly endorsed and encouraged sex surgery for minors, for children.
Unbelievable.
So again, voting and politics does matter. Christians need to get involved and vote in people that will project and enact biblical values in the worldview.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The government's job is to protect our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The government is not protecting the children. Well, first of all, it's the parents. Like, they're taking control over the parents.
And also, this boils down to the home.
Yeah.
This needs to go back to the home.
And if I would have kids in a public school, first of all, I don't think I'd have kids in a public school.
No way.
Like, that's just my everybody that's listening and watching, you can do what you want, but
No, homeschool.
I highly advise, take your kids out of public school, because I don't care which public school district you're in. There's a really good chance that they are teaching your kids this kind of stuff, even if they say they don't. It's like this. They lie all the time. So the parents need to take control of their kids' lives. And back to the politics thing, look at Florida and Ron DeSantis. He's like, you know what? Public schools is for math, science, the basic
History.
stuff, reading, writing, not about gender stuff.
What about women's sports?
That's another.
Well, that's a
topic.
different
Big
topic.
topic.
We're talking about transgenderism.
Well, but there's right now transgender males,
That's true.
like literally defeating all these women, and that's unfair.
You know what's funny
for-
about that? I've noticed feminists are in uproar on this.
Exactly.
Feminists have a better understanding and definition of what a woman is, although it's twisted in their own view. But at least they can say
have a
They have a
definition.
definition. You know what I mean? Like, at least they have a definition, and they know, and they fight for biological females, like an actual female, an actual woman. Trans women, I'm sorry to say it, but they're not real women. They're not women. They're not.
Okay, just listen to what you said.
Exactly.
Trans woman is not a woman.
She's not.
Which
Because if
is
she
absolutely
was a
true.
would it would just be a woman. You wouldn't be a trans.
Trans woman,
There would be no
exactly.
trans there. To say that you're a trans woman indicates that you're not a woman. You're not an original woman. You're not a real woman.
Right. So to use the argument, because Charlie Kirk asks these questions and other people do, he asks these leftists, what is a woman? And Matt Walsh did as well. And these professors and these doctors and these PhDs, they say, well, a woman can be whatever they want to be.
Yeah.
But it's like, a trans woman's a woman. Really? So why do you say trans woman if it's a woman?
Exactly.
Because
If it could be anything, then
right,
right. That makes zero
because
sense.
by saying that, you're putting a woman into a category.
Yeah.
So if a trans woman has to come into the category of woman, there is a category,
There is a
but they
category.
can't explain it. It's so confusing.
Yeah. It's like
because it's irrational.
It
Yeah,
is.
it's
It's
irrational.
totally irrational.
It's
Like their arguments don't hold any rational, logical weight at all.
At all.
let me pull up 2 Timothy 4.
And while you're doing that, I said, we as Christians, or you said, you said speak the truth. And I said, be educated, be knowledgeable. But another thing I want to say is to stand our ground.
Yeah.
Because things can sometimes be very simple, and then they try to make us think that we're oversimplifying things, but it's just the truth, like male and female. And we just have to learn how to stand our ground and say, no, this is the truth. It doesn't have to be complicated.
You don't have to cave in.
Exactly.
You don't need to cave in and
Exactly.
kowtow, right?
Kowtow?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, it's kowtow, right? Yeah. I want to say cowtown. Like, what? No, kowtow. You don't need to pander to. You don't need to pander to them because they're emotionally charged or whatever. Like
And the people that actually are searching for truth will respect someone
exactly
who stands for their values.
Exactly. Because that's the thing. They have nothing to stand on.
No,
So when
they
they
have
see
nothing.
someone standing on truth and a foundation, that is appealing. It may offend them at first, but it's also attractive. It's appealing. And they're going to want to know, okay, why is he so solid? And why am I so everywhere,
Yeah.
And but I just wanted to bring up 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3, where it says, "For a time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but have itching ears. They will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths."
That explains everything.
That explains everything. Literally, we are living in those times, in those days. And, as for us, the answer is this: always be sober-minded, endure suffering, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry. Period.
There you go. Follow the Lord.
Follow the Lord.
Obey him and stand for him.
Exactly. But that's what we're seeing. We're seeing even in the church, teachers who are giving people what they're what their itching ears desires and what their passions desires. I did an article months ago of this preacher. He's a Baptist preacher, I believe. And he dressed up in drag because there was a drag pride parade or a drag parade.
Drag queen?
Drag
Nice.
queen. Yeah, drag queen.
Pride.
Yeah, that's so confusing. There is a drag queen parade in his town. And in order to like show that he's showing the love of Christ, you know, he wanted to dress up like them to show that he loves them and all this stuff. It's like,
What
no,
in
that
the
you don't associate yourself with evil, with darkness. You don't go down to their level. You help them come up to yours.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that is just completely anti-scriptural, anti-biblical, anti-Christ.
I mean, Jesus sat
Look at
down
Jesus.
he sat down with sinners,
But he didn't sin with
but he
them.
never sinned with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the point. You don't need to do what they do to accept them or to say what they are doing is right to accept them. You can accept the person and reject the behavior.
That's right.
And our society has a problem with that. Our society thinks that if we don't agree in something, I can no longer love you. And that's so wrong. Yeah. We can disagree in many, many things and still love each other. Actually, we do. We do disagree in many, many things with each other, with our brothers, sisters, mom, dad. The closest to us, we disagree. So we can disagree with anybody and still love the people.
Yeah. The moral of the story is this. We need to, our generation, we need to regain our identity. We need to pursue and have some sort of like Jesus revolution, like how what happened in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s with those different, like the hippie movement and all that stuff. Like there was like just a wave of the Holy Spirit that came and just like brought forth revival and brought forth, identity and what am I trying to say? Salvation, identity and salvation. And I'm praying that happens for our generation and for the generation below us because they need it big time right now because of the confusion, because of the deception that's going on.
And if God could bring a revival in the 60s, he can do it. He can do it now. And if he could keep Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from having even a single hair singed, then he can preserve our society.
That's right.
Because he is God and he alone is supreme king. Mm-hmm. And he can do whatever he wants.
That's right.
So.
And we're in the fire right now, baby. We are in the fire as a nation. As nations. Western nations, for real. Yeah. We're definitely in the fire. But we're just going to come out more pure.
Another thing about this movement, this transgender movement, is that you said something about the Generation Z's, like 4.5% identifies as
it's
trans.
Something like that, yeah.
That's still such a minority.
It is.
So it's like, it proves, because Daniel and I were talking about this morning when we were playing tennis, that they have proven the strategy that all you need is a small group of people to change a culture. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if they can do that, how much more can God use a couple of his people and change culture, revolutionize culture back to the truth and the biblical foundations of America?
A small, committed, determined, and courageous group can change the course of history.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And culture can literally change culture, like what you're saying.
And we have to let our voices be heard, because how they change this culture is they have the loudest voices, and they have control of the media. Yep. So we have to speak the truth and stand our ground. And number one, we need to get our relationship with Christ right. And we need to know who Christ is. We need to know his teachings. We need to become one with him and follow and obey him. Number one thing, obey God and follow him.
Yep. All comes back to the individual. That's right.
Well, thank you guys for watching. I hope this conversation helped you guys kind of understand a little bit what's going on. Hope it kind of sparks some thoughts in you. Comment on YouTube, or let us know what you think about it. Any comments are helpful. If you agree or disagree on some things or all things, we welcome that. We welcome discussion in this censorship atmosphere we got going on in this culture. follow God, be courageous, speak the truth, and share this video with all your friends. And we'll see you next time.
And there's only 2 genders, male and female.
That's right.
And one Lord,
That's right.
Jesus.
That's right.